I want to talk about Northern Ireland. It's a subject very close to my heart, as you can imagine, because obviously I fought for Brexit and I wanted us to leave as one union. Now, the good news is Northern Ireland's government is to be restored 2 years after collapse, 2 years exactly to the day since it collapsed, actually. There is a meeting of the Legislative Assembly in Stormont in Belfast today at 1 o'clock today to revive the power-sharing institutions. Now, for the first time, the role of First Minister will be held by an Irish nationalist. And this all is possible because the DUP have ended its boycott over the Brexit trade rules. Now, you may remember, of course, the DUP deeply unhappy about Northern Ireland being treated very differently to the rest of the United Kingdom. And I totally agree with that, because Northern Ireland was in a special case where it remained in the single market and the customs union. We put a border, an artificial border in the Irish Sea, and essentially left Northern Ireland alone. Now, the DUP obviously believes that the deal from the government solves many of their problems, and I'm really keen to understand how they've managed to do that. And I'm delighted to say joining me now is Gregory Campbell, who is the DUP MP for East Londonderry. Good morning to you.
Good morning, David.
So I'm very passionate about this, and I think it's been terrible how we've treated Northern Ireland, quite frankly. You are obviously of the view now that many of those lines have been met and that you can go back into the Assembly.
Yes, that's right. We had some grave difficulties and reservations about the system that was entered into, and as you quite rightly say, it left Northern Ireland behind. So there's been a whole series of discussions. Over 2 years ago, we said to the government that this is intolerable. You've got to try and change this, and if you either do it by negotiation with the EU or do it unilaterally, but you've got to restore our internal market within the UK, because 80% of our trade is with the rest of our own nation, the United Kingdom. So they assured us they would, and they told us they would, they kept repeating that they would, but they didn't actually do anything. So it came to a head 2 years ago today, as you quite rightly say, where we said, look, we're going to have to take action to force you to do something. So we took our First Minister out of the post, and the Assembly at Stormont collapsed. So over the past 2 years, we've been talking with the government, negotiating with them, and now we've reached agreement that they will change to a massively significant degree the rules and regulations and bureaucracy and red tape over the trading arrangements. So that was a good thing, and we welcomed that. But we also said to them, there's a political analysis here where there are many people in Northern Ireland feel that because of this, our attachment within the UK has been diminished and lessened. So you need to restore that in a sense by using legislation, so that they've begun to do that as well. So on the basis of that, we're going back to Stormont today, and hopefully we can make progress from here.
So can I just be clear on what these major changes are? Because we essentially had two lanes, a green lane, which would allow the passage of goods from the rest of Great Britain into Northern Ireland. So those were different to the red lane, where they would go into the European Union. Now, my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the EU, and I think you alluded to this, actually hasn't made any concessions here. This was in the gift of the United Kingdom government anyway. Haven't they just renamed the green lane as the UK internal market lane?
No, what we've got the government to agree to do is they have changed the green lane and made that into a UK internal market system, so that anyone buying or selling goods either into Northern Ireland or from Northern Ireland into GB now uses this internal market system. It's only goods that are destined for or at serious risk of going into the EU market, which for most people in GB would be the Irish Republic if they're crossing the North Channel or the Irish Sea. So we've managed to get them to do that. Now, the Irish Taoiseach said yesterday that it did provide him with some difficulties, but he thought they weren't insurmountable. So one presumes, given that he's an EU member state, that he has talked to the EU and managed to convince them to make this change. So it certainly helps us, it helps business, and hopefully is something that will align us within the UK, which is what we've always wanted from 2.5 years ago.
So just in terms of that, and I understand all of that. But Northern Ireland still has a very odd position in that you're still in the single... It basically sits within the two. So you've got the single market and the customs union with the rest of the European Union. Isn't there...
That's for goods. That's for goods, yes.
For goods. Isn't there an issue that if Northern Ireland is aligned with Europe, because we've then got a UK internal market, doesn't that stop the UK diverging from the European Union, which was the whole point of Brexit?
No, it shouldn't. And the key will be if the UK government decide to do that, how they will do that in discussions with the EU regarding Northern Ireland's position. It does give us an advantage in that we are part of our own internal market, which 80% of our trade is with in our own United Kingdom. But there are additional other sections and other sectors where we can build progress and trade for the rest of the world and the EU, and that gives us a bit of a privileged access because of the land border on the island of Ireland.
So just in terms of that, can I just be very clear about this UK internal market lane? Because it depends which publication I read. Are there no checks or just a few checks on those goods?
Well, in terms of checks, there are no checks if goods are bound for Northern Ireland. If the goods are coming from Bristol to Belfast, there are no checks. What there is that differentiates us slightly from the rest of the UK is that the initial establishment of the Trusted Trader Scheme in GB is something you have to do initially. Once you've done that, there are no checks. Except for example, let's say the government assumes or has reason to believe there may be smuggling or illegal trade or animal welfare issues. There will obviously be checks on it, but that has always been the case, even when we were both members of the EU. But that aside, there will be no checks.
So you had 7 tests, didn't you, that had to be met for you to accept any agreement. The first of those is to fulfil Article 6 of the Act of Union, and that means that all parts of the United Kingdom have to be treated equally. Do you believe that has actually been met?
I think that has been significantly met. Yes.
Significantly met or met in full?
Yes. Well, we never said that our 7 tests had to be met 100% of the way in every respect of each test. What we said was, here are 7 tests which need to be met. Now, we don't pretend that 100% of all of the 7 tests have been met, but we do contend that sufficient progress has been made to allow us to progress. Because remember, the alternative was, and the only alternative in front of us now, is to proceed on the basis that we have negotiated, or to go back to what we've been like in the past 2.5 years, with no Stormont and full regulation, full EU rule in terms of goods.
Well, of course, it also unlocks money from the UK, which Northern Ireland desperately needs. It's just, for me, interesting, the traditional unionist voiced leader, Jim Allister, amongst others, are saying it doesn't restore Article 6. So there are concerns about that.
Yeah, there are some concerns, and that's why we've said this is an ongoing process. But, I mean, if you look at, for example, the leader of the nationalist SDLP, he says that he's totally opposed to this package. And that's from someone who wants a united Ireland and wants to see the UK broken up. So we have to proceed on the basis that the vast majority of our demands have been met. We're pragmatic enough to say, let's bank them, rather than have the problems that we've endured over the past 2.5 years. And then there is further progress to make beyond today.
Very good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. I hope it goes well today at that meeting. That's Gregory Campbell, their DUP MP for East Londonderry. It's a very significant day.
It is a very significant day. I mean, we used to do the live streaming for Northern Ireland Assembly, my company Octopus TV, but I think the point that you make, and it goes back to communication and clarity, because people are thinking there's different things there, and I'm not entirely clear. When you say you can substantially do our list of 7, or there are a list of 7...
And I did push him on that.
I know, but his answer was, well, substantially and progress is progress. It is brilliant with it's all happening and they're going to be talking again, but I'm not quite sure we've got the clarity which has given rise to this confusion. confusion.
No, and I think also, you know, at the end of the day, Northern Ireland was suffering from a lack of infrastructure. Obviously, the Assembly hasn't been sitting, so they haven't had the funds, and of course, this unlocks funds from the UK government. Interesting, though, that obviously Sinn Féin's the first minister will be from a republic, from Sinn Féin, and that is extraordinary in many ways. Now, the deputy first minister, and I think people don't really understand this, has the same powers and the responsibilities, equal in status. But it is historically very significant.
Oh, absolutely. If you look at the history of Ireland, I mean, it's tragic in many countries when you look at that sort of side. But I say with all these stories, it is unpacking it and it's trying to drill down. And I still don't think we've got the clarity that we need to turn around and say, look, what is different now about this red lane, green lane, whatever we call it, UK internal market system. Some goods are there. Apart from criminality, smuggling and disease risks, you've got that sort of stuff. What people need to understand, and then they can have their own views, unpack the story, say this is what we've got so far, this is what we need to negotiate, this is what it means in practice.
I mean, look, I think at the end of the day the EU has played a very good game, and there are other countries that sit in Europe where there are borders where there isn't an issue, but at the same time obviously there are huge implications for the island of Ireland because of its history.
And so we go back to the points we made beforehand. The EU want to scare people that they don't do their own equivalent of a Brexit. So what you have to do is make it so painful and so difficult that you would see what happened to our people over there.
Well, let's see. Italexit, Brexit. Who knows what's next? Andrew, thank you.